Have you ever imagined the audacity of building the most secret weapon in history using materials supplied by your worst enemy? It sounds crazy, or even a plot hole, but the truth is that the greatest icon of American aviation only existed because the United States outsmarted the Soviet Union in an almost humiliating way. Many people believe that the Cold War was won only with missiles and brute force, but I'm going to show you that behind the scenes, what decided the game was a strategy from a mastermind who unknowingly left the Kremlin funding his own surveillance. If you think you've seen it all about espionage, get ready, because what I'm about to reveal proves that sometimes the path to victory is making your adversary work for you. Many people say that the SR-71 Blackbird was just a fast plane, but that's a shallow view bordering on incompetence. The truth is, that machine was a fortress, armored against physics and against any attempt at attack, being the result of a decision so audacious that even today it challenges what we understand by military intelligence. The great secret, what nobody tells you, is that to avoid a failure with its cutting-edge technology, the CIA needed to stage an international operation to obtain the precious metal that was hidden precisely on Russian soil. This is the kind of knowledge you don't learn from ordinary history books, and it shows how survival reaching the top requires a shrewdness that most people don't even realize exists. Today, you'll understand how the Americans transformed Soviet titanium into the ghost of the skies that was never shot down, even after more than 4,000 attempts. I'll take you inside Skunk Works and show you how veteran intelligence can turn the tables by using the enemy's own tools to its advantage. Prepare to discover how this masterstroke ensured the Blackbird became invincible, and why this story remains the greatest pride of American engineering. Stick with me until the end, because what happened when the Russians finally discovered the truth will completely change how you view the struggle for world power. Look, let me tell you the truth. For the Blackbird to be born, they had to throw logic out the window. Strategy in the 1960s was not just to build a fast aeroplane, but to challenge everyone who said the project would be a failure. Totally. It's like when you decide to open a channel or a business and everyone says it won't work. If you listen to the herd, you won't get anywhere. The secret here was to take a decision to be the best, no matter the cost, creating a machine that was practically a fortress armored in the sky. The great truth is that the incompetence for many people back then was the fear of thinking outside the box, while the survival of the country was asking for something out of this world. The plane needed a metal that wouldn't melt in extreme heat, and that's where the secret starts to get really good. If you want to apply this to your daily life, stop trying to solve new problems with old tools. Sometimes the solution lies in something no one is looking at. It's like reading a book like Rich Dad, Poor Dad. It teaches you to see money in a way that school never even mentioned. I've seen a lot of veterans out there stuck because people don't want to change their way of working, but the SR-71 proves that impossible is just a word people use for what they haven't tried yet. The biggest problem was that titanium, the necessary metal, only existed in abundance in enemy territory. Imagine the headache they were going through. How to get the material without raising suspicion? Well, they had to act quickly backstage and devised a master plan to get what they needed right under the noses of those they were going to spy on. And what happened next is jaw-dropping. Here's the thing. Flying at over 3,000 kilometers per hour isn't just a matter of pressing a button and accelerating. The friction with the air was so brutal that the aircraft's fuselage easily exceeded 300 degrees, turning the jet into a flying oven. The wrong decision of material would have turned the plane into a puddle of molten aluminium in the middle of the desert. That's when the guys realized the project would be a failure if they didn't use titanium, which is tough and can withstand impacts, maintaining its entire structure armored against the extreme heat coming from outside. The problem is that titanium is a difficult beast to tame, and the incompetence of anyone handling it could ruin everything. To give you an idea, if normal steel tools touched the metal, it would become brittle and break.
It's like trying to fix something modern with a 1,000-year-old technique. It simply doesn't fit. In life, if you want top-tier results, you have to use the right tools, like learning to use a good planner or a productivity app like Notion to organize your plans, instead of leaving everything loose in your head.
You veterans, the engineers of the time, had to learn to work from scratch, creating a secret technological upgrades one after another just to keep the plane from falling apart. A survival of the pilot depended on details that no one else saw, such as the fact that the plane leaked fuel on the ground because the parts only fit together with the heat of the flight. It's a lesson in strategy and patience, where you accept a small failure now to have a giant victory later on. And it was precisely this search for the perfect metal that led Americans to look to backstage from the global market, targeting those they could least trust. The plan was so crazy it seemed like something out of a movie, but it was pure espionage reality. Since the guys didn't have titanium and couldn't knock on the enemy's door asking permission, the strategy was to create a network of shell companies across Europe. The idea was to buy the metal in small quantities, pretending it was for manufacturing trivial things like spare parts or civilian items. It was a decision, but it was the only way to guarantee the survival of the project without the Kremlin realizing it was arming its own adversary. An incompetence of the Soviet spies in not noticing this movement is what saved the CIA back then. Imagine, the Russians were there, happily selling the metal and making extra money without even suspecting that they were revealing the secret to their own downfall. If you want to apply this to your world, understand that the direct path isn't always the best. Sometimes you need to act strategically backstage to achieve what you desire. It's like wanting to invest in the stock market. You don't buy everything at once. You study, act cautiously, and build your portfolio quietly until it's ready, armored. For veterans who followed this saga, the greatest secret wasn't the speed of the plane, but the audacity to make the enemy work for you. In the end, the Blackbird was built with 90% pure titanium straight from the hands of those it was supposed to monitor, which prevented a failure, a historical example of American intelligence. It's a life lesson. Learn to use the difficulties or resources your environment gives you to your advantage, transforming a no into a disguised opportunity. And so, with the material secured, the engineers could focus on how to make this monster fly undetected, leading us to a design no one had ever seen before. The Blackbird's design wasn't just meant to look good or intimidating. Every curve had a decision technical behind it. It was one of the first to test what we now call stealth technology, that is, being invisible to radar, which at the time was a secret kept under lock and key. For a veteran of the air, seeing that black silhouette was to understand that the strategy Americans had leapt decades ahead of everyone else. It's like trading in an old brick-like cell phone for a state-of-the-art one. The difference in power is so stark that everything else seems like child's play. But it wasn't just the metal that was special. Its fuel, JP7, was something else entirely that prevented any failure by explosion. The stuff was so stable that you could throw a lit match into a bucket of this fuel and the flame would go out, I swear to you. A survival of the mission depended on this crazy chemistry because at high speeds, the risk of fire was constant. In your life, strive to have this kind of foundation armored. It's no use having a quick plan if it's volatile and explodes at the first sign of trouble. Many people think that incompetence in many projects is solved with brute force, but the SR-71 proved that intelligence triumphs over brute force. The engineers created engines that were true works of art, changing shape during flight to suck in more air and propel the aircraft into space. If you want to grow in any field, learn to adapt as the pace of your life increases, just as this jet did, backstage from the atmosphere. All this technical preparation is what allowed pilots to do death-defying things, and that's where the magic of flying really began.
Piloting that monster wasn't for just anyone. It was a decision which changed the man's life forever. Up there, at 80,000 feet, the sky darkened and you could see the curvature of the Earth, something that for a veteran, it was the pinnacle of his career. The pilot had to wear a pressurized suit, just like an astronaut's, because any failure in the cockpit would be a disaster. Instant fatality. It's like being at the top of a giant roller coaster. The butterflies in your stomach are constant, but you know you're in a structure, armored and prepared for the impossible. A survival there, total focus was essential, as any distraction could cause disaster in a matter of seconds. Imagine you are operating extremely expensive machinery or conducting a high-risk financial operation. If you don't have the right tools and the right mindset, incompetence, it exacts a high price. To keep their minds so sharp, many elite professionals use meditation techniques or books like The Power of Habit, which teach how to transform complex reactions into something natural and automatic. It is training that separates those who master the machine from those who are mastered by it. Despite the danger, there was a secret, something only those who flew knew. The feeling of being unreachable was the greatest prize of all. The strategy, the flight speed was so superior that if an enemy radar picked you up, the standard procedure wasn't to evade, it was simply to accelerate and leave the danger behind. If you apply this mindset of speed and focus to your backstage, you'll realize that many problems disappear when you decide to move faster than them. And it was with this spirit of invincibility that the Blackbird faced the most tense moments of espionage, where mistakes were not an option. When the Blackbird finally became operational, the American strategy was put to the test before the eyes of the entire world. Every mission over enemy territory was a decision of life or death, where the pilot knew he was being watched by thousands of eyes below. But the secret of that machine was so deep that even when detected, no one could do anything to stop its passage. It's like having a business so innovative and fast-paced that the competition sees you coming through but doesn't have the resources or technology to get to where you are. An incompetence, the weakness of opposing defense systems, became clear every time a missile was launched and encountered nothing but a heat trail. To ensure the survival, the procedure was so simple it was a source of pride. You just had to push the throttle and accelerate, leaving any threat in the dust. If you want to be unbeatable at what you do, build such a foundation armored that their only job when faced with a problem is to grow even faster. It's the same logic as those who study the market and anticipate crises, acting while others are still trying to understand what happened. You veterans who monitored these missions of backstage knew that the risk of a failure, diplomatic, potential was immense, but the confidence in the engineering was even greater. The SR-71 wasn't just an airplane, it was a message of power that said the United States could go anywhere, anytime. Having this unreachable mentality is what separates leaders from followers in any area of life, from sports to major investments. And it was precisely this absolute sovereignty that created legends about mid-air encounters that defy even what we know as physics. Many people think the Soviets stood by and watched everything, but the truth is they tried everything to cause a failure American. A decision, the Kremlin's plan was to launch the MiG-25, their fastest fighter jet, to try and intercept the Blackbird in mid-flight. For a veteran of the air, this was the final duel, the moment when the strategy of each country would be tested to its limits. It's like when a new competitor emerges, wanting to copy your style. If your base is armored, he might try to run alongside you, but he won't be able to keep up the pace for very long. The secret is that while the Russian pilot was sweating to keep the engine running at that speed, the SR-31 was just cruising along with ease. In competence, the technological advancement of Soviet engines was so advanced that if they tried to maintain the Blackbird speed for too long, their engine would simply melt and explode. In life, it's no use trying to accelerate if you don't have the structure to handle the strain, which is why it's so important to invest in your preparation before trying to take bigger steps. It's the same logic as those who study the market and anticipate crises, acting while others are still trying to understand what happened.
Us backstage. During that pursuit, the American pilots looked to the side and saw the enemy's trail receding, unable to climb as high or run as fast. The Blackbird's superiority was guaranteed by pure physics, transforming any attempt to attack into a movie scene where the hero vanishes over the horizon without even looking back. This feeling of total control is what you acquire when you decide to master a technical skill thoroughly, becoming irreplaceable. And it was this superiority that made the world realize that the Blackbird was not just an airplane, but an uncatchable ghost. Even today, when we look at the numbers for that jet, it feels like those guys were cheating at the game of life. Decision. Testing the machine's ultimate limits resulted in speed records that even decades later remain a reality. Secret. Feat of engineering that no one has surpassed. It's like having a world record in something, and 50 years later, young people with all the new technology still haven't come close to your mark. This shows that when you put a solid strategy on the field, his legacy becomes a fortress, armored against the clock. Often, the incompetence, the common misconception in modern design is that they want to do everything at once, whereas the SR-71 was designed to excel at one thing, being unreachable. To ensure that survival beyond the title of world's fastest, the pilots flew the beast across the United States in under 65 minutes, something that seems crazy even by today's standards. If you want to apply this to your reality, learn to focus on a single great skill and be the best at it, instead of being mediocre at 10 different things. That's what the book, The One Thing, teaches. Extreme focus is what produces extraordinary results and avoids any failure. You veterans, those who experience these records, tell us about them. Out back. The plane seemed to gain a life of its own the faster it went, becoming more efficient at the edge of space. It was a lesson in applied physics where air resistance, which should have been the enemy, became the fuel for victory. On your journey, learn to use pressure and difficulties to your advantage, as if they were the wind pushing a wing upwards. This winning mentality is what kept the Blackbird at the top for so long. But as all good things come to an end, the end of its journey was also surrounded by legends. The end of the line for Blackbird didn't come because of a defeat in the sky, but because of decisions, political and strategic decisions in the offices of Washington. Even though it's a machine, armored against any threat, the cost of keeping this monster flying was astronomical, and the advancement of satellites began to change the espionage game. For a veteran, seeing the SR-71 retired from service was like watching a master retire while still the best in the world. In life, you need to know the right time to end one cycle to begin another, ensuring that your survival and may their legacy remain intact. The incompetence of failure of many to understand that the value of the plane went beyond money almost caused this story to be forgotten in the recesses of bureaucracy. Secret. The secrets of its efficiency were so well guarded that even today there are technical details that no one outside that closed circle truly knows. If you want to leave a mark wherever you go, build something of such high quality that even after you're gone, people continue to speak of your work with admiration. It's like investing in knowledge. What you learn, no one can take away, and that becomes your greatest asset. Backstage of success. Despite being in museums, the spirit of the Blackbird prevented failure. Technological advancements inspired everything that came after in American secret aviation. Strategy. The idea of using Soviet titanium to spy on the Soviets themselves remains the greatest irony and the greatest lesson in clever resourcefulness in history. To apply this today, learn to see opportunities where others only see problems, turning lemons into ice-cold lemonade. The Blackbird stopped flying, but the shadow it cast over the world never disappeared, paving the way for mysteries that still haunt the skies today. To this day, many people wonder what happened in backstage after the Blackbird landed for the last time, and that's when the secret gets even deeper. There's a strong rumor about a successor called the SR-72, which would be even faster and invisible, showing that the strategy American air sovereignty never stopped. For a veteran, the end of a project is merely the trail leading to something much bigger and more powerful. It's like in life. When you finish a challenge, it's not time to relax, but to use that foundation armored to jump to the next level with much more authority. The main lesson here is that survival, being at the top, requires you to always be one step ahead of the others. Incompetence is being detached and affected by market crises. The SR-71 was not just an airplane, it was proof that a decision, boldness combined with extraordinary intelligence can subdue even the most powerful enemy. If you want to avoid the failure in your personal projects, start applying the Blackbird mindset. Be so good at what you do that no one can ignore you or catch up to you. Studying biographies of great executives such as Steve Jobs or Elon Musk can give you that insight into how to create something that changes the rules of the game. Ultimately, the story of how the US outsmarted the USSR to build its most lethal weapon is the greatest example of resilience and cunning the Cold War ever saw. Those tons of Russian titanium, which crossed the Moscow sky in the form of an American jet, are a reminder that the world belongs to the bold. Don't let the fear of taking risks stop you from building your own legacy, however impossible it may seem now. The Blackbird began as a crazy dream and ended as the greatest legend of the skies, and your trajectory can follow the same path if you have the courage to take off. After learning this story, it's impossible to look at a challenge and say it's impossible, isn't it? The SR-71 Blackbird wasn't just an airplane, it was living proof that with the strategy, a bit of certainty, and a little audacity, you can transform even the greatest difficulty into fuel for your success. Now I ask you, will you continue accepting the limitations that the world imposes on you, or will you take the decision to act in backstage to build your own version of life armored? The difference between failure and glory lies precisely in the courage to seek solutions where no one else is looking, just as the engineers at Skunk Works did. It's no use acquiring this knowledge and leaving it sitting in your head. True wisdom comes from practical application. How about starting today to look at your problems as if they were Russian titanium, something that seems like an obstacle, but they could be the raw material for your victory? Stop blaming incompetence or external factors or circumstances and focus on your own survival and in its continued growth. If these veterans after the Cold War managed to outsmart a superpower to create a technological miracle, what's stopping you from taking the next step in your career or personal projects? The world is full of ordinary people, but the top is reserved for those who understand the secret of being unattainable. If you felt this content opened your mind and gave you an insight you can't find anywhere else, then you're in the right place. This is the kind of conversation we have here on the channel. Direct talk with substance and focused on making you someone above average. So, if you want to continue receiving these insights and learn how history and intelligence can change your game, subscribe to the channel now and turn on notifications to not miss the chance to always be one step ahead. And tell me in the comments, if you had the power to create something impossible today, where would you start? I want to know who you are and how I can help you on this journey.